Tech Lab alongside Steve Tasker, and joining us for hour number 2 is NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell. Greg Cosell's weekly segment is brought to you by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. And Greg, what an exciting game on Sunday that the Buffalo Bills had against the Chiefs. It was a big win for this team. It was a game that a lot of Bills fans had circled on their calendar, on their schedule when the schedule came out. Week 6 matchup against a really tough team to beat, against a team that before that matchup, the Buffalo Bills were 1-3 against in the last 4 matchups. So what did the Bills defense do to limit Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense last Sunday?
You know, it was a fascinating game, Maddie, because it started out with these long drives and no one scored. And you're starting to think, okay, this is a season where scoring's down. You know, everybody's thinking it's a 38-35 game. And you're starting to think, like, middle of the second quarter, what are we going to have, a 13-10 game with these two teams, you know? But both sides moved the ball. But I guess what really stood out to me was what the Bills did on third down. And I think that's, you know, that was sort of where I think the rubber met the road a lot in this game. And that was the use of, number one, dime. They played 9 snaps of dime. And number 2 was the way they played, the way they used Milano as a spy. So they rushed 3, they used Milano as a spy, and they played a lot of man coverage, you know, which I think going in, we probably would have said that, oh, they're not, you know, you don't, with the players they have in the secondary, the rookies, Jackson, who's a young player, and then they also played Bedford quite a bit. You're thinking that, well, you know, man coverage does not really seem like the approach that you would take given who you're playing. So they spied, and it was very effective, and they played man coverage, and it turned out to be effective as well.
And I thought, how much was it used where, and we saw it on the last interception to end the game, where they deliberately flushed Pat Mahomes one direction or the other, and Milano was there looping around to be right there when he got flushed out. Was that, we saw it on that one, certainly, and the players validated it. They said that was kind of the plan. Did they do that a bunch?
I don't, you know, again, I can't, I watched the tape. Today's Wednesday. It was actually the first thing I watched Monday morning when I came in. So I don't think so. I don't want to say, because Milano spied numerous times, probably 9 or 10 times throughout the course of the game on third downs. So I don't want to say for certain that they hadn't done it, but if they had, it was maybe only one other time. That time, it was clearly the call. As you said, the players validated, because you could see that Miller went right inside. He was not working outside at all. He basically took a step outside and then countered inside immediately, knowing that if Mahomes moved outside, that Milano would be in a position to attack him. So that was clearly a call. You know, and it's so interesting about Mahomes. We know he's a great, great player. That's not the point. But you could argue that, you know, he's kind of a trick shot artist. That's a part of his game. You know, he moves around a lot. Sometimes he moves when he doesn't have to. He's made so many great throws doing that, that his track record suggests that that's truly special, and it is. But, you know, then on that final play, for whatever reason, he just did not see Taron Johnson. I mean, because if he did, he wouldn't have thrown that. So it's something just didn't register there. But again, he moved. Whether he had to or not is open for discussion. But when he moved, he tried one of those trick shot throws, sidearm off platform, and that time it didn't work.
After last season, the Buffalo Bills knew that they needed to bolster their defensive line and add some type of talent. So they went out and got Von Miller, because you need him in games like this against really talented quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes. That has been what the Bills were missing, really, in the last few matchups against Patrick Mahomes. So how big of a factor was Von Miller in this one, Greg?
Well, I mean, he obviously had 2 sacks, and he certainly had the big sack, you know, with just over 6 minutes remaining, that gave the Bills the ball back with an opportunity to win, which obviously they did. But it gave them the ball back with enough time that you didn't feel like it was panic time, that it was urgent, that every play had this incredible importance to it. So that was a critical play. I mean, obviously, anytime you have a player like Von Miller, and Steve can attest to this, it changes how offenses go about pass protecting. See, that's the critical piece. It's not just that he can make a play. And obviously on that sack, he beat the right tackle, and I don't believe they gave him any help there. But we've seen teams change their pass protection concepts because of a player like Von Miller. And that's what you're ultimately hoping as well. You want an offense to chip or to keep someone in as a primary pass protector, because then there's fewer receivers who go out as primary receivers, and that helps your defense because it's a numbers game. If you can't send out 5 eligibles, then the defense, I don't want to say they win before the snap, but they gain an advantage before the snap of the ball. So, that's what someone like Von Miller does.
What does it say about, we've talked about how the Bills rotate those 8 guys through on the defensive line. What's it tell you that in a game like this, Von Miller got 78% of the snaps?
I would probably say, Steve, it means that the game was pretty important.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And I think, look, obviously, Miller is not only a great sacker, but he's a great athlete. So, you want a player like that on the field because Mahomes moves so much. And I think that's probably another reason why he played so many snaps, because we know that Patrick Mahomes is going to move. In some ways, Mahomes' movement has become a habit. There are times he just drops back and he moves. If the primary is not immediately evident to him, he moves. And you need people that can run him down. I forget which play it was when they ran him down. Miller did not get that sack, but you remember the play I'm sure I'm talking about. I just can't remember exactly where it was in the game where, you're a fan, you're probably thinking, oh my God, Mahomes is running around, he's going to find someone for a 40-yard gain, and they ended up getting him to the ground. Because the key a lot of times with Mahomes is not just the pressure, but it's getting him to the ground. And you need speed to do that.
Right.
Yeah, it's been nice to watch Von Miller be able to help with that and that speed element. If we switch to the offensive side of things, one thing that was impressive in the Chiefs game and in Buffalo Bills' ability to win that game was you pointed to the third downs and the third downs on offense for the Bills. I know they didn't convert a great percentage. They were 4 of 11, if I can remember, which isn't great, but I remember an important one where it was 3rd and 13 and they were backed up in their own end zone and Ken Dorsey calls a shot. What have you thought about his ability to dial up those shots, those big time plays at the right moment, and for Josh Allen and the offense to be able to hit on those types of plays that he's dialing up?
Well, that as we were talking about before, that is just confidence in your quarterback, because it was a close game. It had the feel that it was going to remain so, and no one would have said, boy, terrible decision if they punted with just over a minute remaining from their own 1-yard line. No one would have said, oh my God, that's a terrible call to do that. But they put the ball in Josh's hands, and you could tell that he knew that he was not going to have a lot of time back there, and he was right on the back of the end zone. And he moved. And again, it was a case where there wasn't really pressure on him, but hey, I'm not a quarterback. So I'm sure when you're back there, you feel like, hey, time's moving really fast. And he moved to his right and someone was there and he just stopped on a dime and he drilled it to Davis. I mean, the play call was a basic play call. It was what we call dagger. It was an inside vertical and an outside dig. So that's what the dagger concept is. It was cover 2 and, Davis ran the dig and Allen threw a laser. I mean, an absolute laser. And you could make the argument that was the biggest play in the game. Obviously, they ended up with a touchdown on that drive. There were a couple other really important plays on that drive as well. But without that 3rd and 13, Matty, who knows what direction the game goes.
That's right. It was an enormous. It gave them a chance to stay on the field, and right after that, in the last couple of, they were going with pace. It was right before halftime, and they went with pace and got the touchdown, I believe, to Gabe Davis as the half wound down, and and then of course the Chiefs got the 62-yarder to answer. But
that touchdown too came against 0. That was cover 0.
Yeah,
and, my sense was watching the tape that they anticipated pressure. I'm not going to say they anticipated 0, although Steve Spagnuolo is well known as a coach who does go 0. In fact, a year ago, the Chiefs had more 0 blitzes than any team in the league. They're right up there again this year. Because if you recall that play, Steve, they had Knox and Singletary both offset in the backfield. So clearly by doing that, they anticipated that pressure of some kind was going to come. It turned out to be zero, and they got Davis matched on the rookie corner making his first start, Williams, and obviously Josh made a great throw.
Now, the Chiefs were bringing, it seemed to me, and maybe with your film study you could enlighten us, I thought the Chiefs were getting some really good pressure on Josh Allen in that first half, and I thought that play against the zero blitz kind of made the Chiefs later on say, well, wait a minute now, let's pump the brakes on going zero and sending so much pressure because they're starting to get a handle on it. Now, certainly, too, the Diggs touchdown was the same thing, was it not? So did the success they had on those couple plays make a difference in Spagnuolo's, desire to send pressure?
Well, the Chiefs on that touchdown, they had a 5-man pressure. Snead came off the tight slot. He's the slot corner. Bolton added in as a 6th rusher, but he was late. And it was a 3-by-1 set, and they basically had Williams play pure man on Diggs, which was really interesting because the boundary safety had his eyes to the trip side, the 3-receiver side. So again, from a coverage standpoint, they allowed the rookie corner Williams to play pure man against Diggs with no help over the top. But I think you're right. I think the pressure started to be dialed down as opposed to dialed up because, quite frankly, Allen, he wasn't – overall, the numbers against pressure, by the way, were not good. Josh was only 5 for 14 against 5 or more rushers. But he did hit the 2 TDs, and I got the sense that they did kind of slow down the pressure as the game went on.
When Josh was facing that pressure, the Buffalo Bills went to their rushing offense a little bit and got Devin Singletary involved in things. He had 17 carries for 85 rushing yards, average 5 yards a carry, which is a good number. It's the most rushing yards that Devin has had all season. So what do you make of the Bills going to the run and having some success in it when they've kind of struggled at times this season when they've tried to go to the run?
Well, to me, Maddie, obviously you always want success and production. But to me, the bigger number is 17 because they actually came out running the ball. For them, I mean, they're not a run team in the pure sense, but they came out running the ball and they had early success, enough success that they could stay with it. Singletary was getting 6, 7, 8 yards, and that's what you want. It's just, look, we know, and we saw it again this past Sunday, what Josh Allen is. But as we've discussed many times before, it's hard for your quarterback to be Superman on every play. He's Superman on enough plays, and we just mentioned that one, the 3rd and 13, near the end of the first half. But you do need some semblance of a run game, and you do need some production. The problem is because you have Josh, if you start running the ball and you get no production at all, I can easily understand Ken Dorsey's mindset. The mindset is, well, we're gaining 1 yard. We're not gaining any yards. Why not put the ball in the hands of my best player and maybe the best quarterback in the league? And, I get that. But it's just hard to play that way all the time. And it's really hard on Josh. I'm sure he'll say it's not because of who he is, but it is hard. And, Steve, you know that. You know how hard that is for a quarterback.
Well, it's a little bit like Russian roulette. Sooner or later he's going to take a hit and he's got to come out of the game, or it looks like he's got a concussion and they make him come out of the game whether he's got a concussion or not. But you're right. I thought it was very telling that they had 19 handoffs in this game.
Yep.
And that was different.
Yes, and I think, look, every game's going to be different. We know that. We're not going to sit here and say, well, that's going to be the template going forward. We know it won't be exactly the same, but, they know. It's funny when fans think that coaches don't know, but they know that they have to have some semblance of a run game. They understand that. Like I said, if it's not working at all, and you're not gaining yards and you're punting, you think, okay, well, let's put it in Josh's hands. He's pretty good. But at some point in big games, and even though it was the regular season, Sunday was a big game against arguably the 2 best teams in the conference. You're going to need to run the ball, and you're going to need volume and production.
And speaking of different players that the Bills offense has used, another guy has been Reggie Gilliam as a fullback and a tight end. What have you thought of his usage when he is in the game? Sometimes he's been in as an extra blocker. Sometimes he's actually caught a couple passes and has had a touchdown as well. So what do you think of his usage with how Ken Dorsey has kind of deployed him in the offense?
Well, it's funny you say that, Matty, because they're starting to use him a little more. I mean, he's getting meaningful snaps. Last year when they started, he'd play 4 snaps a game. Then, it would seemingly increase. And now there are times where he plays 20 snaps a game. And at times they throw the ball to him. I remember it was a couple of weeks ago, I think, where they ran a mesh concept, and he was the sit route right behind the mesh concept, and they threw him the ball. I mean, and they obviously scored the touchdown a few weeks ago on the first drive. I forget what game that was. But you know what
Tennessee
I'm talking
game.
about on the screen.
Was the Tennessee game, Monday Night Football, yeah.
Yep. I knew it was a night game. I just couldn't remember. But, so they do throw the ball to him. And, see, the thing about playing him, and what's interesting is you'll find out about the defense when they play him. Will the defense, treat him, let's say, as a fullback and play base? And then maybe you get some opportunities. Because when a defense is in their base, you know what their fronts are likely to be, and you know what their coverages are likely to be. Because out of base defense, and Steve, you know this from when you played, teams tend to be a little more predictable from a tendency standpoint when they're in their base defense.
Right, and that's what, and we saw Gilliam on the field early in some of these games, basically for that reason, right? You wanted to get an idea of what the defense, what Steve Spagnuolo thought about the Bills' offense and how he was going to label players when they were on the field, because there's always a question: are they treating Gilliam like a tight end, or are they treating him like a back? And how are they matching up with him when he gets split out?
And our team's saying potentially, which some will, that hey, if they want to hand the ball off, more power to them. We're going to play the pass, and we're going to put our nickel out there. And if they want to hand it to Singletary, let him hand it off, because we're more concerned about Josh Allen throwing the ball.
How much of last year, and I don't want to go back down this rabbit hole too much, where dissecting this run game thing and what people think about that, but last year the run game really came alive in the last month and a half of the regular season for Buffalo. Devin Singletary became a force, and it became something the Bills fans really kind of latched onto this last offseason. How much of that was a response by Bills opponents? And I know you can't really say definitively, but your sense is, were teams like saying, please just hand it off to Singletary because Josh Allen and Diggs and the rest of these guys are so good. We're more afraid of them doing it. So we're going to invite them to run it a little bit and see if we can slow down their offense just by making the clock run a little bit and may have fewer possessions in the game. Was there any of that you sensed?
Well, again, that's hard to know, but you made a great point that a byproduct of running the ball is you do shorten the game. And I guarantee that defenses, without question, would rather see the ball in Singletary's hands than Josh Allen's hands. And it's no knock on Singletary, but I think we all know that. So that's why I said you might even see teams, even when Gilliam's in the game, even if they count him as a fullback, Steve, you might see teams play nickel, because figuring that, you know what, if they want to run the ball, let them run the ball. So we'll rally and we'll tackle. And if they get a good gain, if Singletary gets a 7-yard gain, great. That's a 7-yard gain. We'd rather not give it up, but we much prefer that than Josh dropping back and making something happen. So it'll be very interesting how teams defend the Bills going forward, now that, assuming that Sunday's game is a predictive indicator that they do want to run the ball more. We won't know that till they play more games. But I think this staff knows that the running game does have to be some kind of factor.
Greg, now that we're through 6 weeks of play, we're kind of looking back on the season so far and what's ahead. If we look back, what do you think Josh Allen has done differently, or what have you seen that's been different out of him as a quarterback this year? One thing I pointed out earlier in the show is he's been involved in every touchdown but the one rushing touchdown that James Cook scored.
I would say that what started last year and is more apparent this year is patience. I think that Josh always has a big play mentality, and has probably always had that since he started playing. But I think when you're a quarterback that is being asked to basically run the entire offense, again, now we get back to that run game discussion, but let's put that aside for the moment. You have to be able to complete 4-yard balls, 5-yard balls, because if you're going to throw and the pass game's essentially going to be your foundation, Matty, then you have to be the sustainer, not just the big play guy. And if you're going to be the sustainer, then you have to complete 4-yard balls and 5-yard balls. And when he came into the league, we knew he couldn't do that. He'd throw rocket balls and he'd miss guys. And now he's able to do that much, much better. You see how many short throws that he makes, whether those are actual calls or whether he decides to just throw them based on the concept. My guess is they're calls, but he's showing so much more patience and command of everything that needs to be done in order to sustain offense. And I think that's where he's continued to grow.
You know, one of the things about this offense as well, like last year and the year before, they had Cole Beasley in the slot. This last week, they went with Isaiah McKenzie, who was back on the field after being out with a concussion. Did not have
Shakir.
And Khalil Shakir. Now, McKenzie didn't have his best game, had a couple of drops, didn't seem like he didn't seem himself. We'll just put it that way, which says something about our expectations for his productivity out of the slot. But Shakir seems to be steady, and McKenzie seems to have, he's speed. He's got some speed to offer. Which one of you, in your opinion or your insight, what's your hunch about what they do at the slot spot going forward?
Well, nothing's 100%. Let me start with that. But I think McKenzie's at his best when you're playing teams that play man. And you anticipate you're going to get a lot of man, because we've seen him in the past run away from man coverage, and I think that's what he does exceptionally well. And I think you can use him on jet sweeps, things of that nature, because of his speed. I think Shakir might fit better if you're playing against more zone. I thought Shakir had a good play, and not that it was unbelievable, but on that final drive late in the first half, they blitzed off of Shakir's side. Allen obviously read it. He pointed it out before the snap, but Shakir had to understand it too, and he just stopped in the void. And I think that's a positive sign, because people always just assume, hey, it's the quarterback reading the blitz. And Steve, you and I know there's a lot more involved to defeating blitz than just the quarterback. But I think you might see McKenzie as a big factor when it's man, and maybe Shakir settling in a little more when they anticipate a team playing more zone coverage.
All right, Greg, thank you so much for the time. Thanks for kind of looking back on this big Chiefs win with us as we kind of look back on the 6 games that the Buffalo Bills have played so far this season. We appreciate it. We hope you have a good weekend of the many games you will be watching and dissecting.
I don't get a bye week, Maddie.
We do. We're
I'm
out of here,
sorry.
man.
I wanted
Thanks.
to say happy bye week, but
keep working hard, Greg. Appreciate it. Keep
All right,
working
guys,
hard.
Thanks.
All right.